Hey Chai listeners, welcome to Chai After Dark. This is your co-host Shubnam, and today Samim and I are going to be talking about Welcome to Chippendales episode 7. Now we're getting to the end of the series and it's really getting interesting, so buckle up and take a listen.
Hello,
what's
hello.
up?
What's up? Episode 7. Wow.
I know, this is turning real dark. It's wild.
You've been telling me for like a few weeks, but I've been watching these episodes like one at a time. So I was trying to take the full effect in. But last week when I said I didn't want to watch episode 7 and 8, I totally take that back because I watched it back to back. I couldn't like even take a break between episode 7. So I already watched 8 as well.
Nice. It's dark, huh?
It's like if the worst thing you could think of that your South Asian uncle or any auntie or uncle would do, that's what they're fucking gonna do. Like,
yeah.
It was pretty crazy.
Don't you feel like he has like the worst, most toxic parts of Desi culture and the worst, most toxic parts of American culture, and he just melded them together and it was like the worst he could be? That's what I feel
That's kind
like.
of what he even said. Like the mom was referring to him as, "Oh, you can't be rich in India. You definitely can't be rich in the U.S." And now we know why. But yeah, he takes every bad characteristic you can actually think of, and he takes it as his own. He's like almost proud to be a complete fucking idiot.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. He's definitely a screw up. I don't know. But
I wonder if when we were growing up together, we didn't grow up together, but we grew up adjacent communities. Like,
yeah.
what would be the crazy thing that somebody would do? Like, this guy started Chippendales. I feel like all of our friends or acquaintances were like just going to college and
Dude,
doing their own thing. I don't know. And that's what our dads did in the 70s. Like, they were just going to
yeah.
college, their money. And this guy's like, nah, I'm cool. I'm going to take it to the top.
One of the scandals when I was a kid was at the family camp. They were saying, and maybe this was you, I don't know. They were saying that like the older boys tried to drink behind the cabins. That was like the craziest scandal. Like the teenage boys or whatever. I was like, oh, that was
I don't
like the
think that was
craziest.
me because it wasn't me. I did not try to drink at a Muslim family camp, but I heard those stories as well. They were always older than me.
Oh,
So
okay.
if I was like 13, there was like a cool group of boys that were like 16. But it wasn't even that. It was also just for the listeners out there, Shabnam and I used to go to this Muslim family camp in Northern California. I'm just going to be a little bit vague. I don't want to put anything specific
Yeah.
behind it. It was what you think it would be. It was a bunch of Muslims hanging out in the woods. We would get up super early, take walks. The moms would cook, I guess, in the kitchen for all of us. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be misogynistic, but no, I used to see aunties on walks as well. It was
No, yeah,
fun.
they would do other stuff
Yeah.
too. I don't know where the food came from. I
It
just
was in
remember I
that
got
big mess hall, right? Like that
yeah.
big mess hall. Groveland, California. Shout out.
Nice. So
What if like one day we find out that our dads knew Showman?
I don't think our dads knew Showman because Showman was in LA and Showman he like doesn't seem that interested in going to school. Like our dads were really school people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. He was in LA and also a different community. Also, as evidenced by the last episode, he didn't want to hang out with brown people anyways.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Showman was not interested. I mean, and also like I don't think our dads were having substance abuse problems. So
My dad did go to LA in 1984 for the Olympics and saw Pakistan play a gold field hockey match, and I think they won. So
yeah.
Pakistan's second gold or first gold, my dad was there.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
But I don't know. I don't think he beeline towards Chippendales in the same. Man, I hope no one's listening today. Let's just move on. If anybody heard this, okay, don't contact my family.
I don't know, maybe I'm gonna take this out, but I told my mom about the show, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, I heard about Chippendales. Your father told me about it, and he was saying how the American society is going downhill." I
Are
was
you
like,
serious? When was this like 30 years ago?
yeah, like, I don't know, like, obviously, like, decades ago, but I was like, "Oh, okay."
Well, everyone does know what Chippendales is, right? Like, I
Yeah.
haven't talked to anybody in the last few weeks that doesn't know what actually Chippendales is, but I will say, welcome to Chai After Dark, everyone. By the way, we are reviewing Welcome to Chippendales episode 7 today.
Yeah.
Go watch it on Hulu. I would watch it. Like, if you guys have some free time, you don't think you want to watch this entire series, you should. Episodes 5, 6, 7, 8, they're less than 40 minutes each. It's a quick watch, and
Yeah.
you can join in on this conversation about Showman Steve Banerjee,
It's
our
a
parents' friend.
it's a crazy immigrant story. It's like, you think it's just Chippendales, but no, this is really interesting immigrant story.
I just like, what was he trying to prove? I think that's what I've been trying to think about. Like today was after I watched the 6th episode last week, and then I watched the 7th and 8th episode this week. What was he trying to prove? He didn't have any sort of community around him, and typically the excess and the wealth that we've seen, and the people that are trying to keep up with the Singhs or the Patels
Yeah.
or the Joneses, they're
Yeah.
trying to keep appearances. He didn't
Yeah.
have anyone. That's why I'm so surprised he ended up the way he did. It must have been like mental illness or something, because it's kind of strange. Like, who was he trying to impress?
I think he also had a huge chip on his shoulder. Like, he wanted to impress his mom, and he wanted to justify to her that he made the right decision, and he just went out of control with that. Like, he did something in India to where she's like, "You're a failure there." And so I feel like he was just like needing to succeed really, really big at something, but no matter how big this got, it just wasn't enough for him. He had to have more and more control and be like the face of it, which is also weird because it's like if he was trying to make his mom proud, this job isn't the one to make his mom proud. So it's really just, I don't know. You're right. I think it's mental illness.
It has to be. If this was
Yeah.
my business, or if I was an investor in this business, I would just take that cash. I would just say, "Oh, Nick, you're on the road 50% of the time, and you're sending me $60,000 every week in the 80s."
Yeah.
That wasn't enough for him. He had to
Yeah.
lose everything. And we're gonna get into what he does in episode 7.
Yeah.
This motherfucker,
He's insane.
he's insane.
Yeah. Okay, well, so let's get started. So the tour is
Yeah,
going super well. The first scene is like just a lot of ass in the opening scene. Nick, Denise, and Bradford are like hyping the dancers up as they head out in like assless chaps and zebra print thongs to do their performance on tour. And then we get this montage while Footloose is playing. And it starts basically like with the three of them raking in the money, partying, having threesomes all over the country. And then between the drug, sex, and money making, they decide to play Monopoly super randomly. I was
yeah.
like, okay, they needed a break, I guess. And and then Denise is like constantly third wheeling Nick and Bradford. It's annoying Bradford at least. Nick seems kind of okay with it.
I mean, Nick is getting that attention from male and female, and he swings both ways in these episodes. But poor Denise, traveling around with a gay couple, hoping
Yeah.
one of
Hoping
them
for
is going to
attention.
turn straight. And the Bradford threesome stuff is hilarious because Bradford isn't remotely straight, and
Yeah.
there's no inclination that he is even into women. So I think he's just doing
Yeah.
it because Nick is doing it. But then Nick doesn't want
Yeah.
to do it either. They're probably just hopped up on cocaine, as is the
Yeah.
common theme of the 70s and 80s here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So Denise finally goes off on her own and she calls this theater in Michigan to try to confirm the dates. And she discovers that good old Steve is booking a Chippendales tour without them. And so obviously she tells Nick, and Nick is livid. And he calls Steve and he tells him that he can't launch a competing tour. But Steve is like, our contract is on the House of Pies napkin. And Nick hangs up and he like promises Steve, he's like, you're gonna hear from my lawyer, and he like slams the phone.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's crazy because that scene, he's like all pissed and he's in an empty theater and he's like, ah, like yelling into the empty theater. It's like, okay, it's an interesting scene choice.
He's like, during the entire shenanigans before he calls Steve, he's like, "I fucking love Cincinnati," and they're like, "This is Cleveland." He's like, "It's the same thing." They don't even know where they are, shaking their asses. But
Uh,
this is exactly what we were saying. Steve is like self-destructing. He has
yeah,
no clue what he's doing. Even when he's making money, he's like, "No, let me completely fuck this up and start a tour that competes with my own tour because he's still making
yeah,
50% of it." So, what a weirdo! But yeah, he just had to be in control.
yeah. So Nick ends up going to court and getting this like temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction against Steve so that Steve can't use the Chippendales name, style, or essence in operating his tour. So back in Steve's office in LA, Cheryl, the lawyer, brings the news to Irene and Steve. And Irene is like, "What if we call it Chippendales Mania?" And Cheryl's like, "You want to create a tribute act to your own act?" And so, like, basically, they're getting really desperate, and Cheryl is getting sick of them, and then Cheryl asks them for money, like for to get paid basically after this whole exchange. And Irene gives her a check and she's like, "Can you wait until next week to cash it?" And Cheryl's like, "Sure." And it's just like they're totally unraveling. It's crazy.
Now you can tell something big is coming up because, as we discussed in episode 6 and episode 5, Showman is turning into a bad, bad, bad man. Like you can tell
Yeah.
he's Breaking Bad, just like Walter White. He's like, okay, now's my time to shine and be in control and be a complete freak. And then on top of that, their financial woes are at first hinted at, and then it just becomes a complete open secret, I guess, that Irene knows that Showman is spending all their money. It's just like the suits and the glasses and stuff. It doesn't even do him any favors. I know, like back then,
Yeah.
like that's how you showed that you were rich and famous, but it's like, dude, you could have just been in sweats and
Yeah.
everybody would have been super cool with it.
Yeah. Tracksuit. Yeah, that would probably go along with his
Yeah, tracksuit
persona at
actually
this
would have
point.
been. That's
Yeah.
you're totally right. He's
Yeah.
like just shows up one day with a big gold chain. Names he's like, "Hey, I'm not Showman, I'm Sergey," and just comes up to Nick. That probably would have been good for him. Probably should have made some Russian connections.
That's funny. Yeah, that would have aligned with his vibe. So obviously, Steve is being Steve. So he gets all edgy and pissed that Nick duped him. And Irene is like, "Yeah, because none of this is your fault at all." And he's like, "Not at all," as he's like scarfing down pills. And Irene's face is like, "What is going on and how did I get here?" Like, I don't know. I feel so bad for her. And he's just has no insight. He's so one track minded. And I feel like he's probably already an alcoholic and a drug addict at this point.
But they did an amazing job with his
Yeah.
development curve because they're not just taking in substance abuse and or alcohol abuse and or retaining of power. Overall, all like the characteristics that we talk about, what might make somebody off growing up in this culture or community, that's what he ends up being. Like he can't be
Yeah.
happy. He desperately, desperately needs validation. He cannot live without it. He needs Nick to call him his boss. Like
Yeah.
they cannot be colleagues, coworkers these entire 7 episodes because Nick shows up in the second episode. That's like it's just like Steve's like, no, we cannot be partners. You're my employee. You're my employee. You're my employee.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Like this Hulu series doesn't touch on his kids other than the one baby that they show with Irene, but
Yeah.
man, his kids must hate him. Like
Yeah.
I know he's long dead, but it's like holy shit.
Yeah. So then we go back to Nick, where he and Denise are supposed to leave for the next leg of the tour, and Bradford is getting annoyed. He's like, "Can I have him alone for a second, please?" to Denise. And she's like playing all innocent and ditzy. And she's like, "Oh, sorry, sorry." But she's like lingering and taking all this time to get on the bus. And then finally she does. And Bradford goes to Nick. That has to stop. And he puts his foot down and tries to get Nick to like draw some boundaries and, for their own relationship and get um, Denise to kind of like lay off a bit. And he tries to convince Nick to go back to New York with him, but Nick decides to go with Denise. And Bradford is like, "You disappoint me terribly." And so even their trio's having issues too. So it's like all the characters are a little bit unraveling. And I feel like maybe Auntie was right. Some people aren't built to be rich.
No. I think Bradford handled it okay. I think Nick got him all
Yeah.
up in the cocaine and stuff. This is only due to the series that we're watching. Like, we don't know what that guy did in real life. But
Yeah.
the Denise unraveling, that's been pretty apparent since like episode 2. She's in love with
Yeah.
Nick. It's so obvious she's in love with Nick. She even references it. She's like, I love you.
Yeah.
And he's like, I love you. Not like that. It's
Yeah,
just very
yeah.
like, he's basically like, love you as a friend, but they're still hooking up.
Yeah.
And then Bradford is the benefactor who started the tour with Nick. He shows up in episode 5 or so, but Bradford's still around getting that ass and that money.
Yeah, and I feel like money is not getting to Bradford because he always had it, right? Like, he's always
He's just
had
like giving
money,
it for
so
free. I know. He's
yeah.
just like Nick. Nick is a he doesn't seem like that bad of a man in
Yeah.
this series. And we don't
Yeah.
talk about Nick that much other than Showman being completely pissed off at him relentlessly. But Nick's just like trying to do a good job. He's like got self esteem issues like everybody else might.
Yeah.
His high was unicorn tails, and he's like, I really need to replicate that. And he's having a
Yeah.
tough time replicating it. So he's in this series, he's in Chippendales because he found something that he loves. I never got any like negative impressions from Nick other than trying to do a good job. And he even
Yeah.
tries to be Steve's friend. Like, if you
Yeah.
recall the snowball scene, he was like, let me teach you how to play. And Showman's like, I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to play
Yeah.
anymore. He couldn't
Yeah.
even handle snowballs. So Nick is a great character. Yeah, Unicorn Tales. Everybody watch it. It's a real person. So
Yeah, no, I know, you're right. Like, Nick is really likable because, it's like he's having a tough time coming to terms with that at this time period. And, he was married to a woman, divorced this woman. But you're right. His big thing that he's guilty of is finding something that he loves that he just wants to like do in peace, you know?
yeah.
And yeah, it
I don't think
sucks.
he would have ever screwed Showman either if Showman didn't become an asshole first. Because I don't think
Yeah.
Nick's intention was ever to screw him. I think it was legitimately like, let's be 50-50 partners.
Yeah.
And Showman just couldn't handle it. He's like, no, you're a better dancer, obviously better looking. He's wanted by men and women.
Yeah.
So yeah, Showman was jealous. So
Yeah, and also Nick is the one that suggests to Showman, like, "Okay, give me your lawyer's name. Let's draft up the paperwork for the tour."
mhm.
And Showman's like, "Oh no, we don't need to do that." Nick's like, "Okay, I guess." Right? So it's like, Showman's Steve is just the one that screws everything
Yeah.
over. So
And Nick's always tried to do everything the right way. And that's a great point about the lawyer. Even in the beginning, he wanted to have contracts with the clubs. Like, he never wanted to do just things like super shady like Showman would. Showman's like, hey Ray, go blow up the electric
yeah,
potato
tomato.
and electric tomato
Yeah.
and go steal this from me. And I'm gonna call the television station and tell them there's a long line here or whatever. And then he wanted more fire hazards in this episode. He's like, let's just keep
Yeah.
going more and
Yeah.
more. Like, let's get more people in there. We're already fined so far up the ass that it can't get any higher. So
Yeah.
Showman is completely unraveling, and Denise is too a little bit.
Yeah. So back in LA, Steve can't sleep, obviously, because going crazy. So he's wandering around his house at night and he sees Irene sitting at the table, smoking, looking at the books, and using a calculator. And when you're using a calculator in the middle of the night, you know it's bad. So she she suggests selling the house because she's like, the numbers aren't lining up. And Steve starts yelling at her. And his jealousy of Nick comes out. And he's like, you think Nick is the best thing that happened to us, and he's like, I'm capable, Irene, I'm capable. And she's like walking around on eggshells around him like, okay, Steve, okay. And it's just like, oh my god, I just want to like punch him in the face in these moments. Like, he's such a child. So then,
Totally.
like, yeah, then we see him like doing all this cocaine, and I'm like, you're doing cocaine. And he tells them. So he's at the club. He's doing a lot of cocaine. He's like drinking a lot, and this is when what you were talking about, where he tells the bouncer to let all the people that are in line in, and the bouncer's like, "Oh, we're already a little over capacity," and he's like, "Oh, who cares? Let them in. We need the money." And then, of course, the fire department shows up and shuts the club down, and it's like you can't help somebody that wants to continuously screw up their life, and that's where he's at. I feel like.
I mean, he must have had a tough life. Like,
Yeah.
the dad isn't in this series. The dad doesn't even really show up in the research that I did on
Yeah.
Chippendales,
Yeah.
i.e., googling Chippendales. But
Yeah.
he's an emotionally immature child, and it's very well represented in this
Yeah.
series. It's amazing to watch because you already knew in episode 1. At first, I thought he was going to be like this amazing businessman, and I think I recall his boss, Mr. Singh, in the first episode that is trying to give him a promotion, but Kumail Nanjiani's character Steve is just like, no, I don't want a promotion. I want my own business. So I was like, okay, cool. He's going
Yeah.
to be like a businessman throughout this, and maybe
Yeah.
some unfortunate stuff happens. But no, he's responsible for all of it. And for somebody that wants to be so well renowned, well
Yeah.
liked, and he's super into famous people, as he says throughout the
Mhm.
series as well, it's just unreal how much he self sabotages himself.
Yeah.
And 90% of this was completely avoidable, but he's got something in him. He's got that dog in him to sabotage.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. So Cheryl explains to Steve that he needs to close his doors, and Steve is resistant. And then Irene is like, the club is over. Chippendales Los Angeles is over. And you can tell that Steve is totally spiraling and he's not really accepting this, but he's like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything right now. And then who does he turn to? His number one bitch boy, Ray.
Ray?
Yeah. And then we go back to Nick and Denise in Texas. And Denise is like handling all this shit like a pro. She gets the signs changed out front. She's like telling everybody what to do. And so Nick seizes that opportunity to tell Denise she doesn't need his help anymore. And he wants to go to New York to be with Bradford. And
Oh,
she's totally disappointed. And she says, there's a million guys to fuck on the road. And he says, but I don't want to fuck any other guys. And she's like, we had a deal. And he's like, I know, I know. Which, what deal did they have? They never really come out and say it. You just kind of feel like they have like a friends with benefits type of thing.
yeah. I mean, I think I don't. I've never traveled around the country with cocaine in my pocket and a guy on my right and a girl on my left, so I don't
Yeah.
really know what she was thinking. I know what they were
Yeah.
thinking. Like,
Yeah.
they're just making money hand over fist, traveling and
Yeah.
hooking up nonstop, and she's looking for love. Come on,
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah.
like love, really?
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
I don't know. I've never done cocaine, but I'm assuming you probably say stuff that you don't want to say. And if Nick, Bradford, and Denise are hopped up on coke all over the nation, then they're probably telling each other they love each other. And it seems like Nick didn't really agree.
Yeah, so then she goes, "But we're a couple." And he
Yeah,
goes, "But we're not. Not really." And then you can tell she's like super hurt and she's like, "You're going to pick him over me?" And he's like, "Oh, come on. Do I have to spell it out for you?" And
he's like, I'm
she's like,
gay. Like, I'm
"Yeah.
gay. Like, what do you want me to do? I'm gay. Like,
Yeah.
and he's finally happy. And this again goes with Nick again. He's never happy with anybody, and he's finally happy with Bradford.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to fuck other men. All this guy does is fuck other men. Like
Yeah.
in this series. So good for him. And Denise, I feel bad for her, right? Like you can't be
Yeah.
around that many men. But she's also like hooking up with the strippers too, right? So it's like
Yeah.
that was their deal. Just
Yeah.
do whatever, but they're not together.
Yeah. And she says, "Well, you were married to a woman." And he's like, "Yeah, because I was in love with her." And then you could see
Ouch.
she's even more
Yeah.
hurt. Yeah. And so then he's like, "Denise, can't you be happy for me?" And she's like, "No, fuck you very much." And she walks away.
She leaves. Yeah. Man. I mean, what do you
It's
think?
sad.
Like what do you how many gay guys have you followed around the world
I have
falling in love
not
with them?
followed. Yeah, I've never thankfully been in love with a gay guy. Went I do know somebody that that happened to, but I'll save that story for the paid feed.
Hey, like I said, listeners, we are reviewing Chippendales at the moment. At the end of the month in January, stay tuned. Shubnam has some stories, and they will be
Yeah.
behind the paid feed, so our lives are spared.
Yeah. All right. So Bradford and Nick then start focusing on their relationship, and Nick goes back to New York, and they're really like, progressing and being a monogamous couple. I think That's so the show
Yeah.
portrays. And then in the New York office, Bradford shows Nick the plans for a European tour. So I guess till this point, they've mostly just been doing the US. And so they start to make out and get busy, all excited over this European tour and what they're going to do there. But Bradford's like, okay, hold that thought. I got to go pee. And he goes to the bathroom. And then we see a bald guy with a neck tattoo come into this fancy New York office, and then we all we hear is two gunshots. And by the time Bradford gets out of the bathroom and tries to like find out what's going on, he basically sees Nick shot dead in the New York office. And
Yeah.
Bradford's like shocked, hysterical. He's like super sad. I don't know. I can't even imagine. That's like
Yeah.
so crazy in an instant.
This scene was predicated. We knew it was coming. It was pretty obvious how the series started that Nick was going to get murdered. But yeah, like the bald guy, I think I saw his face in a previous episode. So they do show him, and I think it's just a precursor for him to be the hitman.
Yeah, yeah. And even though you say that we kind of saw this coming, I don't
Mm,
know. I also kind of didn't see it coming. Like Nick is such a big character, and just like in an instant for him to just all of a sudden like be dead. I don't know. It's crazy. It's just a crazy
yeah.
dark series.
When we talk about Chippendales, and we've referenced this in the previous episodes, the Chippendale murders is what they call this story. There's a documentary called Chippendale Murders, but those murders are the ones that we refer to, right? Initially, Paul and Dorothy, the people that help Showman get the idea for the initial club, and they make fun of his backgammon club. So then Steve Showman knows that he needs to change his strategy. But Paul and Dorothy are murdered. But again, we're in episode 7. Those murders don't get referenced anymore, and now we have a new murder. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I still don't know what's going on from the first episode, but it's pretty clear that Showman did this with
Yeah.
Nick. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get that in the next scene because back in LA at Steve's house, he arrives home from work and Irene is like waiting for him and she's like calling out to him like Steve, Steve, and he comes to the family room where she's like sitting on the couch all distraught, and she goes, Nick is dead. He was murdered this morning in the New York office. Somebody just came in and shot him. And Steve does his best Kumail Nanjiani actor impression and like is all surprised, but he starts asking questions right away about how she found out and if Bradford witnessed it and all this stuff. And then he starts creating a narrative. And he's like, sounds like a robbery. A random stick up or something. New York is such a violent place. And I'm just like, okay, relax. So then Irene says to Steve, Steve, I'm sorry. I know you two weren't exactly close. And then Steve goes, yeah, we had our differences, but I'd never wish harm on him. And she's like, of course not. And it starts to feel like she is feeling him out to see if he did
Yeah.
it maybe. And Steve is just such a like pathological liar and asshole. He's just going to lie till his grave, it feels like.
Oh, but she finds
So
out, right? Like you can tell.
yeah. Well, so the next morning, Denise shows up at Steve's house and she's like banging on the gate because, of course, he has like a big gate into his like circular driveway. So she's like banging on that gate and they hear it in bed. And so Steve comes running down and starts accusing Steve of murdering Nick. And she's like cussing him out. And then he's like telling Denise, like, you're acting crazy, like, you're drunk, you're on drugs, whatever. And then Irene comes up. She got out of bed too. And Denise starts saying to Irene that you're married to a murderer and Steve has blood on his hands. And Irene's like freaked out. And she goes inside with Steve and she keeps telling him, she's like, we need to call the police. She's yelling and she's at our house. And he's like, no, we're not going to call the police. She's like, no, we need to call the police. And she like reaches for the phone and he's like, do not call the police. And that's when it hits her. But all she sees is that he's acting crazy. So she starts like talking to him like a child. She's like, okay, we won't call the police. I'm going to go check on the baby. And then she asks him, Steve, I noticed $15,000 was missing from our safe. What did you do with that money? And she sees his face and then she gets hysterical. She's like, "What did you do with that money?" And she realizes that obviously he used it to hire someone to kill Nick.
Yeah.
And he goes into full gaslighting mode and is like, "You know me, you know me." And she's like, "I don't fucking know you. Get off of me." And she gets their kid and she walks out. And on the way, he like begs her, "Please, please, please, I'm really sorry." And she says, "For what?" And he doesn't say anything. And part of me, I'm like, is he stupid? Because she has to ask him throughout this series many times, like, why are you sorry? And he gets it wrong. And then here he doesn't know why he's sorry, because he's only sorry that she's leaving him. He's not sorry that he killed Nick.
Yeah, I don't know. Like we talk about it too much almost at this point. Is he gonna say sorry? Like, do uncles say sorry? Does anyone really say sorry? I'm not even talking about like South Asian people or dissies. Like, he's not gonna say it. He's a
Yeah.
super, super, super flawed, selfish man. And
Yeah.
we can say the trope, right? He's sorry he got caught, like obviously,
Yeah.
but it's more so just like, sorry, don't leave. And there's nothing else to it. Like Nick is dead, who cares? And his performance, fake performing that he was sad that Nick was sad or Nick was dead. It's pretty good. He was like,
Yeah.
I would never wish harm upon him. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Male stripping to murder. I guess when you start like a shady business like this, anything can happen, but I don't really get it. Like he didn't have any reason to kill Nick. He would have still made money even if Nick was taking too much money from the tour.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. So Steve's alone at home and he gets a call and he rushes to answer it because he thinks it's Irene. He's like, "Irene?" But it's the FBI agent wanting to talk to him. And so they basically make him come in for an interview. So he goes in his like best suit and his best like Steve impression of having all his shit together. And they interview him and the FBI agent goes on this tangent. He's like, "Showman?" It's funny because your name is Showman and you show men. And I'm like, this is what I said in episode 1, dude. He should have kept the name. It's a perfect name. It's
They
crazy.
stole your joke.
I know, yeah. So the FBI asks him all these questions and the agent is being like a total like friendly white guy and Steve is being a total like gaslighting, total desi reserved know-it-all uncle. It's really
Yeah.
funny to see.
He's basically
It's
like, I'm here because I'm brown and stuff like that. I'm like, no, dude, you're here because you killed Nick.
yeah, yeah. And then finally he goes, "Am I a suspect?" And the
Mhm.
agent is like, "I didn't say that. Did I say that?" And then he goes, "You're treating me like a suspect." And then the agent starts totally getting under his skin and pointing out his failures of stuff that didn't go right in the club and saying there's a pattern of contempt for authority and disregard for the law. And then Steve goes off and says some pretty profound shit. He goes, "This is your society. You made the rules. You made it so that some people are born at the bottom. Why is it my job to come and fix it? I just wanted a successful business for my family. You put people like me at the bottom. You made fun of the name that my father gave me. You made it so difficult for me, and I still made it. I have everything, and I regret nothing." And I was like, wow.
Way to
I
admit
that
it.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like some of what he's saying, you're like, "Okay, I get it." There's a lot of like race elements to this. It's obviously a struggle to come here and make it for immigrants
Mhm.
and people of color, but damn, okay, he took it somewhere else. Like
Yeah. And I think it just keeps coming back to what we're discussing. He has such a need to be successful and he doesn't have anyone to show it off to. So now he's just like showing off to this random FBI agent. I'm rich, I made it. And this FBI agent apparently created a society where
yeah.
immigrant people start off on the bottom, but I mean, what he's saying, he's not wrong. Like
He's yeah,
generically speaking, he's extremely, extremely correct. Like
right.
that is exactly how it is. But in his situation, he's completely incorrect, considering
Yeah.
he was the one that was on top and he fucked it up so bad, got himself in that situation.
Yeah, totally. So they, of course, like as soon as he turns around and walks out, they're like, he's guilty. Yeah, he's guilty for
Yeah.
sure. But we need to get some more evidence on him and all of that. And then he walks out of the police station, and the first thing he does is like barf in the plants right outside.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is crazy. Like, even he can't stomach his bullshit at this point.
Yeah. I don't want to play
So,
anymore.
yeah, exactly. So like the feds are all over his ass now, and without Irene he's getting even more paranoid. He's just in the big house by himself, like ruminating and stewing. And then we see at one point in his home office, he grabs this grocery bag
Yeah.
and he opens it with this like Chips Ahoy package in there. It's actually not Chips Ahoy, it's like a fake wannabe Chips Ahoy brand. And he opens it, and then he opens all the cookies, and you're like, okay, it's, it's not going to be cookies because it's like really serious scene, but it's just really funny that it's in the cookie tin, and then instead of the tray of cookies, there's a gun in there.
Yeah.
And you can see in his eyes that he's like super angry and he's super arrogant and he has a lot of resolve. And you're like, okay, he's gonna do something, and it might be taking his own life.
Yeah. And that's the end scene, right? For episode 7.
Yeah, that's the end. It's crazy. I don't know.
We know what he does with that gun, but I think we're going to hold it until we review episode 8 next week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
I don't know. It's crazy.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy to see somebody go through this much ups and downs and be this bad at life.
Yeah. At any given point, he could have just stepped back, sold off the business, or become an absentee owner, like I said, and just take the 25% that Nick was giving him. But there wouldn't be a TV show, right? If he did that, he'd just be another uncle that became successful, and he'd probably still be alive today,
Yeah.
sitting on millions of dollars.
Yeah, if he just let Nick do the tour, he just closed the LA club or he sold it to someone, that would be fine. Like, he would be in a great place. He could start some other business. He could do something else, but he just his ego's too much to move on, I think.
It is hard
couldn't
though.
do it.
Like, let's
Yeah.
think about it. Like in the 70s and 80s, who was coming here and killing it, right? Like it was tough. There was
Yeah.
immigrants, of course, and I think we discussed the numbers on one of our episodes, but there was 51,000 Indians here only from
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
And conversely, American Indians, Native Americans, there was 850,000 in the 70s. Of course, those numbers are completely flipped now. Today,
Yeah.
there's 5.1 million Indians. So
Yeah.
already 50,000, 100x. Like it's so to be successful during those times, even with that success, he wanted so much adoration and he just wasn't going to get it. Comes down to daddy issues and mommy issues. I think it's just so difficult to live life if you do have that huge glaring hole. And I don't know, as children of immigrants, we totally get it, but I don't think our life was, we don't know what happened to him, but our life wasn't like that.
No, yeah. Right. Yeah.
We had a normal fucking upbringing for the most part.
Anyway.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, for the most part.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah. All right, cool. So I guess let's jingle out with that, and we'll be back for episode 8. And like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, Blue Sky. Give us a 5-star rating. We'd love a 5-star rating and to hear a little note about what you guys think. Write us a review. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and you can email us jaiafterdark@jaiafterdark.com. Jingle out. Thank you so much, everyone. Later, Somen. Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed Welcome to Chippendales on Hulu. I wanted to remind everybody that you can catch more of us on Patreon at Midnight Jai Society. Please come support us. We have true crime drops every month. We have extended cuts. And coming soon, we have Uncle Chronicles, where we discuss sordid details of our past in a wholesome manner. If you would like to support us further, please check us out, Jai After Dark everywhere. And to become a paid member, please check us out on Patreon, Jai After Dark, Midnight Jai Society. Thank you, everyone.